welcome back to EDH Deck Building. I am your host, Demo, and this is the Commander Deck Doctor. What I call a Commander Deck Doctor is basically me looking at people's decks and, making changes that I would make. I originally had done this on my channel with a patron's deck that they submitted to me. It sort of happened purely by accident. They wanted me to do a deck tech, and they ended up giving me a completed deck list, so I actually ended up going through the whole deck on my channel and questioning, do you actually want this? Do you want that? I came up with maybe better options for them. And, a lot of the deck doctors that I do it specifically on my Patreon now. I go through my philosophy, and that's why I kind of like to throw them on my channel once in a while. It is a little bit of an advertisement for me and my Patreon and what I do there, in case people are curious, because I do talk about my deck doctors quite a bit on my channel, but it goes over a lot of the philosophy. And the ones I particularly picked out here today, and the one I did last time as well, you can go check out that video too, that I did a few months ago where I posted my actual deck doctors that I did on my Patreon. So I'm just essentially clipping out the parts that I did on my Patreon, because of course on there I do a little more casual than I would on my channel. And I am just combining that and putting it on my channel for you guys to check out, because there's a lot in there that I think is valuable information for Commander players. My philosophy, right? It's always going to be my opinion. That it's my channel, EDH Deck Building, where I give my opinion on what I think makes for good deck building in the Commander format. So a lot of people might not agree with some of my takes, and I do maybe have some pretty controversial takes in this video particularly. I think I might have a few, but I think I have some interesting philosophies on deck building that might be valuable for some players. And again, obviously giving you guys a sort of an inside look at what I do on my Patreon on a weekly basis. So enjoy the show. Bloodchief Ascension. This is a great one. Obviously this is another card that works in any deck. It's doing the life drain thing. It works extra well with, again, this is a card you could put in any Commander deck, but if it fits exactly what my Commander's doing, it's kind of hard not to put it in, right? Because of course your opponents are losing that 2 life. So it's going to fit perfectly. And then also because they have probably an overfull hand, they might have to discard to hand size. What you could also do the discard thing here a little bit. Like I see you have Waste Knot as well. Is that maybe the reason why? Because you expect your opponents to be discarding to hand size? Do you have Dark Deal? You do. Dark Deal sort of works here. Yeah, it works here. It works here for sure. Another thing you could do is, the stuff where, again, because you're putting pressure on life totals, if an opponent pays life, you have Temporal. There you go. Perfect. Yeah. Stuff like this. Exactly. So forcing your opponents to pay their life to counter your stuff like this. What's that other one that does that? The counter spell. What's that black counter spell? Dash Hopes. There it is. Black counter spell. But any player may pay 5 life if that player does counter Dash Hopes. So it's just a way to put pressure on your opponent's life. This is target player loses 5 life. Not target player, but you know what I mean? Plague of Vermin, another one that is enticing. Again, it fits, just like with Pain's Reward, it sort of fits the Huggy strategy. Starting with you, each player may pay any amount of life. Repeat the process until no one pays. Each player puts a 1/1 black, right? So this is enticing. It's working with the greed. It's working with enticing your opponents to pay life. All right, let's go through some cards that I don't love. Like, I know who I'm talking to here. I've played against you on Patreon a couple times. You play fairly high power decks. I would say of all the people on my Discord, you're probably right up there with the power level in your decks. You play some really powerful stuff. You have Ancient Tomb, right? You do have Exsanguinate, Torment of Hellfire. So I get that. You got Coffers and Stronghold, of course. Nykthos. You got a lot of tutors. Your decks are pretty high. I would say a lot of your decks are like 8. Even when they're doing a more casual theme, they're still, like, you got Slaughter. Like, you play a lot of those cards. Like, I don't like Slaughter Pact and Snuff Out. I've talked about this a lot. Most famously in my What Format Are We Playing video, which all you guys should have watched. I don't love these cards. We're gonna take a quick look at something. Let's go. We're on EDH Rec. Top commanders. All right. Slaughter Pact and Snuff Out do not destroy black creatures. So it doesn't destroy the most popular commander in the entire format. It doesn't destroy the second most popular, the third most popular, the fourth most popular. Yes, the sixth most, right? Black, like, right? These are all, and these are just the commanders. But also, these decks are going to probably have a lot of black creatures. So your opponent has their Lathril Blade of Elves out, and you're sitting there with a Slaughter Pact in your hand. Why does it matter that it's free? That doesn't matter. What matters is I got to get that Lathril off the table before they tap 10 untap Elves and I lose 10 life, right? You know, or maybe less so Edgar, but Muldrotha, like there's a kill on sight commander. These are all kill on sight commanders, right? Muldrotha, Ishin, Korvold, you know, Prosper. These are all, as soon as it hits the table, right? Kalia. These are all kill on sight commanders that you have to get off the table immediately. And if you have Snuff Out or Slaughter Pact in your hand, the fact that you can cast it for free is meaningless because it doesn't target any of those commanders, right? That's why I don't like those cards. All right, back to the deck. I've said that on my channel many times before. I won't keep going into it. It's nice in that one, like your opponent plays a Vorinclex and you're tapped out and you can immediately, yeah, that's nice, sure, I guess. But for me, I'm just like, no, I Infernal Grasp, which you don't have, is better than both of those because it hits anything. There's a lot of black creatures in the format, guys. A lot of, like, what if your opponent playing your opponent who's playing a mono black deck? Your Slaughter Pact and your Snuff Out don't work against any of their creatures. None. Right? So just don't, I'm not gonna keep on it, but I just don't love those cards. That's all I'm saying. Okay. Bubbling Muck. Okay. Just, I mean, ritual effect, sure. You know, as far as rituals go, this is a pretty good one. I would play this over Dark Ritual any day of the week. A lot of people like, because for me, turn one, I cast Dark Ritual and I get 3 mana is like, okay, but it's, then what? I would much rather cast Bubbling Muck on turn like 8 and then just go to town. Bubbling Muck is way better than a Dark Ritual in a mono black deck anyway. Force of Despair is an interesting one. Again, you like your free spells. I just, this is okay. This is a card that when I first saw it, I was like, oh wow, destroy all creatures. That can be really good. And there can be the, you know, Avenger of Zendikar scenario, or your opponent casts Tooth and Nail. There's some rare scenarios where this card can be amazing. But I've played with this card in decks and just been like, this card's not very good. It's just not very good. I guess if they cast a Vorinclex, you can use this to destroy their Vorinclex, but again, not a great way to do it. All right, this is 3 mana, or I exile a card from my hand to destroy a Vorinclex. That's not great, I don't think. This card sort of attracted me at first, and I tried it out a few times, and it just never worked out well for me. You get those fringe scenarios where it's just a bomb and it works phenomenally, but most of the time it's just a bad board wipe or bad targeted removal, because a lot of times you can only kill 1 creature with this. Hero's Downfall is a card that I do not play anymore. Again, Infernal Grasp, I would play over this. I mean, unless you're playing against a lot of Planeswalkers, I would probably, like, better than this. I immediately stopped playing Hero's Downfall when Murderous Rider came out, because Murderous Rider is the exact same card. I mean, you lose 2 life, which in this deck actually could be a benefit, right? It's just the exact same card, but I can also cast a 2/3 creature with lifelink later in the game when I need a blocker, or maybe I need life. So Murderous Rider is just, I don't know, unless you have Murderous Rider. I don't think you do though, right? So I don't play Hero's Downfall ever. And there's almost no situation, I guess, unless I'm playing a Toshiro Umezawa deck, there's almost no situation where I wouldn't prefer a Murderous Rider over Hero's Downfall. Sword of Hearth and Home. I guess it is ramp, if that's the only reason why you're using it. The blinking part, I suppose it's possible you have a couple of cards where that actually fits. Ravenous Chupacabra, which I would probably it's almost an auto include for me in a mono black deck, just because it's, again, hits any creature, stapled on a creature. So I would put Ravenous Chupacabra in this deck over Snuff Out. And then you can also blink it with your Sword of Hearth and Home. I don't know if you're using that at all, if you're just using it for ramp. If you're just using it for ramp, Sword of the Animus is probably a lot better. Also, it's an attack trigger and not a deal damage trigger. So I guess the protection from green and white is relevant, but you know, I don't typically play the swords for the protection. I play them for what they're doing. The protection it's a crapshoot, right? It's like, okay, are my opponents playing green and white decks? Maybe, maybe not. If they are, then it can be really good. Yeah, Sword of War and Peace. That's the number of cards in hand one. There you go. Great. See, so we're doing that number of cards in hand thing. Probably one of the worst swords. Good fit here, though. The protection from red and white is actually pretty good here. If I was going to pick two colors that I want protection from in the format, it would probably be red and white. Not because of popularity of colors, but because white has a ton of targeted removal, so it protects against that, and red has a lot of damage effects like Blasphemous Act, and it protects against that. So this is actually a pretty good fit here. You got Cryptghast, you got all the... I mean, just listen, I've played against you before. Just be careful that you're not just kind of dirtling along, and then turn 7, I got my Cryptghast out, and I cast Bubbling Muck, and I just kill everyone with a Giant Exsanguinate. Because then... what's the point? Just play an Erebos deck, right? Every Erebos deck I used to play against, that was the go-to mono black commander. And that was every Erebos deck was just Cabal Coffers. I exsanguinate everybody, or when Torment of Hellfire came out, that became the other win con there. And that was it. Every deck was that like that. It was just black, mono black good stuff, and I win with Torment of Hellfire. You know, and you just use the Cryptghast, Cabal Coffers stuff. Yeah, you can do whatever you want. All I'm saying is, at the end of the day, you might as well just play any deck if that's what you're doing, right? So I that's why I like to stay away from the temptation of doing things like that. I wouldn't put Torment of Hellfire or Exsanguinate in my deck at all. Yeah, you can get to a point where, okay, it's turn 10 and things are getting real sticky, and oh, look at, I drew an Exsanguinate off the top and I win the game. Yeah, but it just feels bad because at the end of the day, your deck did almost nothing. Whatever you had done up until that point didn't really matter, because at the end of the day, you're just winning with Exsanguinate and a Cabal Coffers, right? So I'm more interested in winning the way my deck is intending to win. You have Erebos, that's funny. Yeah, this guy was the go-to. This guy was the most popular mono black commander, and every deck was just a good stuff deck. It was just a good stuff mono black deck that won with Exsanguinate or Torment of Hellfire. It was. And every time I saw Erebos, I was like, boring. Mutilate, okay. Yeah, pretty good. Still a pretty good board wipe in a mono black deck. People just don't like this card, and I don't know why. And it's particularly good here. Nightmare Unmaking. Exile each creature with power greater than the number of cards in your hand. If you have an opponent with a Blightsteel Colossus in play, because you're going to have a big hand. So this card, I think, is extra good here because it's likely either you can get into the fringe scenario where my opponent has a Blightsteel Colossus or some other big creature, and I can just get rid of that. Or more likely, it's going to be exile each creature with power less than the number of cards in your hand. And since you have 7 or 8 or 9 cards in hand, that's going to exile everything. So this is 5 mana, exile all creatures. That's a fantastic board wipe. And you know, exile, of course, we need. I would put in this over Mutilate. Mutilate's still good, but I would probably put this in as well. Nobody plays this card. I don't get it. Oh, by the way, Dismember again. This is the. I only have to pay 1 for it, but what's it gonna? It's not gonna get the important creatures, right? Again, when I'm building a deck, I'm thinking, what if my opponent plays a Vorinclex? What if my opponent plays an Avacyn? What if my opponent plays an Elesh Norn? What are those creatures that are going to just ruin the game for me or win the game for my opponents? Dismember gets rid of none of them. Not one of those creatures. You know, all those cards that are going to be game ending for me, Dismember gets rid of none of them. I don't want that. I don't care that I can pay 1 mana for it. I don't care. That's not important. What's important is I'm sitting there with a Dismember in my hand. I can cast for 1 mana, but my opponent has an Avacyn, so it's useless. It is the same reasoning I have for I want my removal to hit any target. Because I never know what I'm going to be dealing with, and I want the cards in my deck. I only have so much removal in my deck, and I want it to be able to hit any creature. Because what are the chances that I'm going to... Like, again, you have Slaughter Pact, Dismember, and Snuff Out. What if you have all 3 in your hand, and your opponent has a big black creature in play? What are you going to do? They're all useless, right? I would much rather have... just about anything else that can hit any creature. And black hasn't, again, you have Deadly Rollick, you have Baleful Mastery, Hero's Downfall, Murderous Rider, Infernal Grasp. The fact that, again, these cards are great in like Modern and stuff, where you're almost never going to come across a creature. First of all, costing less is super important in those formats, but you're almost never going to come across a creature that's more than a 5 toughness. In Commander, that happens all the time. All the time there are creatures that have more than 5 toughness, right? So I don't like it at all. Again, I would say that my big piece of advice here is just try to stick with what your commander and your deck is actually doing and play like Miser's Cage and Black Vice and, stuff like that. Stuff that is actually fitting the theme of what Ebony Owl, Natsuke, Pain's Reward, the stuff that really fits what your deck is doing. And, like if you find that you're just winning a lot of games by Torment of Hellfire or Exsanguinate, it's like, okay, then why even? And it seemed like you really liked this deck. Like it was fun and interesting and all that kind of stuff. So there just doesn't seem to be a need for these cards because it would be I would much rather win through my commander's ability, or killing my opponents from drawing too many cards. That's a really satisfying way to win a game. And you're going to get a lot less groans as well. So, all right, moving on. Mana Curve looks great. So you're off to a good start there. No Orc-Lore Mage. Why does everybody hate that card so much? Orc-Lore Mage, I go get my Prime Speakers again. And again, you have lots of creatures here you want to be copying. Avenger of Zendikar, right? Cataract Leviathan, right? So I go Orc-Lore Mage. Repeatable. This is like, there's so many commanders out there that you want to be repeatedly doing graveyard shenanigans with. I just don't get why nobody plays this card. You can also do Entomb is the one shot. You can also do, because I think you really definitely want to be throwing a couple of creatures in your graveyard that you want to be copying. I should also almost make a list of this stuff. Vile Entomber will put a creature, any card in your graveyard, unmarked grave. I thought it was interesting that they came out with these cards all in the same set. This is non-legendary card, so you can't get your Vorinclex or your Prime Speaker, but you can get these other guys, the non-legendary ones, so that's also a great fit that you don't have. Stitched Together, great recursion spell, really great recursion spell, since you're probably going to have a full graveyard. So we got to do a little bit of the basics here because you are newer to the format. Commander Sphere, to me, is a card that I almost never play anymore. It is, first of all, again, the two cards that I end up recommending the most on my Deck Doctors, it happens every time, guys, and I don't get it. Why don't people like these cards? Orc-Lore Mage and Ornithopter of Paradise, right? Ornithopter of Paradise is maybe my favorite mana rock in the entire format now. It's just a 2-mana rock that adds mana of any color. The fact that you can't tap it right away because it has Summoning Sickness, who cares? That's almost never a downside for me, because early in the game you don't need to. It more importantly is mana fixing you, which in most decks, especially in like a 3-color deck, that's so important, right? That you get the mana you need early in the game. That's way more important than the fact that you can tap it right away. And also, the fact that it's a creature can be a bonus. First of all, it's an 0-2 flyer. Later in the game, you can just use it to chump block if you desperately need to. But also, because it's a creature, it does kind of fit the theme of what you're doing. You can, if you really want to, get your Lord of... Lord of Extinction. I have Lord of Extinction and Ornithopter Paradise in my graveyard because my Ornithopter Paradise came out on turn 2 and then ended up dying. I exile those two guys from my graveyard. Now I have a flying Lord of Extinction because Ornithopter Paradise has flying. Now my opponents are in big trouble, right? So again, the fact that this guy is like an 80-80 or whatever doesn't mean much because my opponents can chump all day, but now it's got flying. Now they're in big trouble, right? Again, just more bonuses. You guys should look at every single one of your commander decks and say, this is my homework assignment for you guys. Look at every one of your commander decks and go, should I have an Ornithopter of Paradise in here if I don't already? But like I say all the time, actual land ramp, land dig is always better than mana rocks. Like I probably would put Ornithopter and Paradise in here, but barely. I would take Fel War Stone out. I would absolutely take out Commander Sphere because you're in green. Land ramp is always superior. Always superior. I mean, you don't need Commander Sphere for the card draw. Definitely not. There's better ways to do that. Fel War Stone as well. I would put, like, what do you have? And this is, I start here when I'm ramping. Rampant Growth, okay. Sakura Tribe Elder, of course. Farseek, okay. So you need Nature's Lore and 3 visits. Take out Fel War Stone and put one of those two or both in. And also they search for forests, which means you can get your, oh boy, what are you going to get with it? You don't have a single, oh man, never mind. You don't have a single one, eh? So We got to talk about your lands here. Okay, let's go through your lands again. You're new to this, so let's go through Temple of. Okay, here are cards that again we're playing green. Here are the cards that I would never put in a green deck because I have ramp. Okay, Evolving Wilds. I would never put that in a green deck. There's no need for it. Evolving Wilds is a way to mana fix. This is not ramp, obviously. It's a mana fixing, so you get the colors you need. Ramp and mana fixing are not a problem in a green deck. They shouldn't be. There's no reason for Evolving Wilds. There's no reason for Terramorphic Expanse. Just put more ramp in your deck. Cultivate, Kodama's Reach, right? The really easy. You have Cultivate, so Kodama's Reach, right? There should be no reason. And what you do, whenever you build a green deck, whenever I build a green deck, more forest than any other color, right? You always put basic lands in your deck, right? So you do have 2 swamps, 3 islands. Okay, great. You want a couple of those, but more forests because you want to guarantee you have green early in the game because you need the green to go get the other lands, right? So you got to make sure you err on the side of having more green. So even if I'm putting in dual lands of any kind, I would lean towards the ones that produce green so that I make sure I have it. So you don't have Temple of, like Terramorphic Expanse I would take out. Temple of the False God is another card that is, I would never play this in a 3-color deck because it's adding colorless mana. And also, like I only play Temple of the False God in a monocolor deck because it's adding colorless mana. And also it can just sit there and you can really get screwed. So you're getting screwed on the fact that you might have a land that doesn't produce mana at all if you don't control 5 or more lands. Also, it's only adding colorless. So even when you turn it on, it might not be super great. So I wouldn't play Temple of the False God either. You need some, for sure. Again, because you're playing a green deck, and I see you have Verdant Catacombs, you need to be able to fetch forests or swamps that have more than one land type. So if you don't already have the triomes, Zagoth Triome, right? Maybe these are expensive. You need this in here because it's a forest swamp island. You can go get it with your Farseek. You can also get it with Nature's Lore and 3 visits, and you can also get it with your Verdant Catacombs, and it fixes you in all colors, right? You can also just do anything that is, swamp, island. Even again, if money's an issue here, these are all, a lot of these, like even Drowned Catacomb is one that I would put in a deck over this guy. It enters the battlefield tapped unless you control 2 or more other lands. I mean, that's okay, but I would say this scenario is more likely that you're going to control an island or a swamp. It's almost a guarantee that you're going to control an island or a swamp. Again, which is why you want the more land types thing. Fetid Pools, this cycle I play a lot. It's an island and a swamp. You can cycle it away later in the game when you don't need lands, and it's fixing you in 2 colors, and it's an island swamp that you can go grab with your Farseek, right? Sunken Hollow is another one that's an island and a swamp. So you need a few of those. You need at least 1 or 2 options so that you can go fetch it with your Verdant Catacombs or you can go fetch it with your Farseek. Of course, the dual lands are probably too expensive. I don't play any of them. The shock lands aren't that bad. Putting a couple in. The triomes, if you can afford those. But even just there are some really, really cheap options now that are and they have the land types. Bad River, again, Bad River I would put in over Evolving Wilds. You're essentially getting the same thing because you're searching for a basic land and putting it into play tapped, so you can't use it right away. Bad River is coming into play tapped, and then you're searching for an island or swamp and putting it into play so you can use it that turn. But Bad River is going to, again, go get those multicolored lands, right? Evolving Wilds is okay in like a monocolor deck, but no, it's not okay in a monocolor deck. See, this is why I don't play this card. I didn't even realize it until now, but I never play Evolving Wilds because I always find better options, right? I like a card like Esper Panorama. I'm going on a real rant here. I like a card like Esper Panorama because if I need mana right away, I can use it right away and then fetch a land later. With Evolving Wilds, you can't use it right away. So early in the game, you can get real stuck. Bad River is another better option because it's essentially doing, and there's one of these for all the different color combinations. You can get a island or swamp with it. So it's doing the same thing as an Evolving Wilds. It's essentially the same speed as an Evolving Wilds. You can't use it right away, but I can go get one of my fetid pools, and now I'm fixed in 2 colors instead of just 1. Or I can go get a breeding pool with it, or something like that. So I prefer those. If we're getting into the whole land thing, which I'm going on a real diatribe. Again, the not good here. Again, these are lands that I would never put in a green deck. The bounce lands. Gary, I understand that they fix you in mana, but you're in a green deck. You don't need to do that. Right? Here's all the lands that I would take out of it. I'm going to actually have to physically show you. Okay, I would take this out. Are you milling yourself? How much mill? I didn't see a lot of self mill here. If you're milling yourself, don't put a colorless land in your deck unless it really fits what you're doing, because you can always put in Ghost Quarter or Strip Mine or Wasteland, which are going to be way more usable in a Commander game. Way more. I promise you, at no point are you going to be like, man, am I glad I have a Drowned Yard Temple in my graveyard. It's okay. You know, it's later in the game, you might want to return it from your graveyard, maybe. Ghost Quarter or Strip Mine, guaranteed every Commander game you ever play, those you're going to be like, man, I'm so glad I have a Ghost Quarter. You have none of them. You have no Ghost Quarter, Strip Mine, Wasteland. You need at least one. Again, I like Ghost Quarter. I actually prefer Ghost Quarter in a 3-color deck because you can use it on yourself. If you're really, really stuck for mana, I can blow up my own. I have 3 forests in play and I need an island. I can blow up my own forest and go get an island out of my deck. Ghost Quarter is a must here. I don't like Drowned Yard Temple. It works with Orc Lore Mage, I guess, but that's a really bad, slow way to ramp, and you're in green. Don't need it. Don't need Evolving Wilds. I don't think you need this either. Again, you're in green. I don't think you need Exotic Orchard. You definitely don't need Forbidden Orchard. Definitely not. Put more lands in that are just producing mana. Like, you have Opulent Palace. Put in the Zagoth Triome. Put in even just the 2-color lands, but land types is important. You got to have at least a few lands here that have the land types, so you can go get them with Farseek or Nature's Lore 3 Visits. Do not like bounce lands in a green deck. We don't need to be doing this either. This is just a land that enters the battlefield tapped and adds black. How are we getting it in our graveyard? Again, Orc Lore Mage, but how are we getting this in our graveyard? Right? Think to yourself, how am I getting my deck more salvage in my graveyard? I don't see a lot of self-mill here. Doesn't look like you're doing. I thought you were doing the mill strategy, but you're not. Don't like Dakmar Salvage. It's just a land that's going to enter the battlefield tapped and only give you black mana. I don't like Myriad Landscape. I play this card a lot, never in a green deck. Don't need it, right? It's just the disadvantage of a land comes into the battlefield tapped, and then I have to pay 2 mana and tap it, and that's way too slow. You're in green. That's way too slow for a green deck. A green deck ramps way better than Myriad Landscape ever could. Path of Ancestry, sure. No. Pillar of Perons is a card that I would probably almost never put in a deck. Almost never, because it's just going to sit there. And I mean, let's look at the cards that we can't cast with it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. Like, way too many. There's way too many cards we can't cast with this. Gone. Mill 4 card. Sure, okay. We can do that. Reliquary Tower is definitely a no-no here. We don't. This is good. If you recast your commander, it's also great for when you're like this. Sanctum of Eternity to me is a card that is going to be way more usable in most commander games than is a Reliquary Tower. So Sanctum of Eternity, you need Ghost Quarter. Go to my colorless lands list and look through there, all the colorless lands that you could be playing, that most of them are going to be more usable. I'm really going on a rant here about the whole lands thing, but I think it's relevant because you're like, again, bounce land, no. I wouldn't put bounce lands in a green deck. A green deck, for me, all the rules that apply to lands you would put in your deck are, for green, is completely different because you can fetch for lands all the time, right? You have land dig, you have access to that. So green has its own set of rules for the lands you put in your deck, as opposed to every other color. There's Myriad Landscape or any of these cards, Evolving Wilds that you would typically play. In green, you're just like, no, I'm not doing any of that. So the rules are completely different. Temple of False God, not in a green deck. Again, go through Terramorphic there. So those are the lands. I don't love Yamamaya Coast either, but it's okay. So there you go. I just took out a bunch of lands there. And again, I didn't even see how many you had to begin with, but I would probably put, so you're missing one of the temples. I would put all 3 in here. You need those land types. Again, especially in a green deck, because you can go dig for them. Right? In other decks, it's less important to have those.
having a Triome in a green deck is incredibly important, and you should try to make room because I can Farseek and fix in all 3 colors with 1 land, 1 spell. Nature's Lore, 3 visits. Again, Mana Rock's gone. Don't need that. If I'm making a deck in green, Commander Sphere gone. Felwar Stone gone. Arcane Signet and Sol Ring. I don't play Sol Ring anymore, but Arcane Signet and Sol Ring are the only mana rocks that I'm going to put in my deck, except for Ornithopter Paradise, if it fits what I'm doing, and I think here it does fit with what you're doing. So I could probably find room for that too. 3 visits, Nature's Lore, Kodama's Reach. Throw those 3 in, and maybe Skyshroud Claim again, which is going to... This one is the one that I still play, and the reason why is because it gets land types. It gets forest cards, so you can go get a Triome with it and fix in any color, right? This is the Skyshroud Claim is I fix in all the colors that I need with one spell. That's what I would do. And then, you have the Battle Bond lands, which again, kind of expensive, but I would lean towards those, stuff like that. The Drowned Cat, I think they're called check lands that look for an island or swamp, or do you have a forest or swamp in play? Those lands I also really like a lot because it's likely they're going to come into play untapped. That's where I'm going with. Okay, we got to move on here. I spent so much time on the lands thing. Burgeoning is a definite no. This is a fantastic card on turn 1 and a horrible card on every other turn. In this deck, horrible card. Imagine drawing this card off the top on turn 5. It's like, you have no lands in your hand, right? So what good does it do? It does no good. You're not in a lands theme here at all. That's definitely a no-no. That's just a dead card. Even on turn 1, it's just okay because you play at turn 1 and then you have 2 more lands in your hand. So by the time you get around to your other turn, you now already have 3 lands in hand. Maybe, again, best case scenario, you have 4 lands in hand, but still, that's the Christmas land scenario. In most situations, Burgeoning is going to be a dead card unless you're in a lands theme, which you're not, right? I'm not even going to, because there's so much of the sort of the basics to cover here, I'm not even going to get into what your deck's doing, because your deck is doing what a Mimeoplasm deck does, right? Your deck is, right? And again, I would put Auric Lore Mage in here, Unmarked Grave and Tomb, and concentrate more on, I don't really care. You can use your opponent's creatures, but I more so want to put really awesome creatures into play that I can copy. And by the way, I would put at least 1 option in here for a creature that has hexproof. Segu Mauler comes to mind for some reason. Something like that. I want a creature that I want to give my commander hexproof. I want 1 option in my deck of a creature with hexproof or shroud. So my commander will have that. It doesn't even have to be a big creature like this. It can be a small creature because you just want, again, Nightveil Predator, one of my all-time, I would do a few of these. Right? I have a Nightveil Predator. Now my commander has Flying Death Touch Hexproof. That's a lot of really awesome keyword abilities to have on your commander. There's a blue-green guy that just came out in Warhammer 40k, I think, that has the exact same abilities you could also throw in here. I would throw a few creatures like Nightveil Predator in here that have some really awesome keyword abilities. So that, and most importantly, is the hexproof. So I can give my commander hexproof so it doesn't die so easily. Indestructible would be great too. Throw a couple of creatures in here with Indestructible on them. Go for the Throat. Again, this is the 3rd Deck Doctor in a row where you guys are playing this card. There's no reason to play it, especially in a Sultai deck, because, again, Infernal Grasp is just straight up better than this. So you guys should be... again, Infernal Grasp is another card that you guys... I'm always suggesting that you guys never play for whatever reason. Take this out and put Infernal Grasp in. You also have black-green, so Assassin's Trophy... Abrupt Decay, maybe Maelstrom Pulse. Oh, there's so many. Binding the Old Gods is a great one that I like. Yeah, Binding the Old Gods. So destroys any non-land permanent. Then gets you again a forest card, so it's going to get you your Breeding Pool, your Triome, or whatever. And then all your creatures gain Death Touch. Sure, why not? Great card. The one I just talked about, it's probably the best removal spell from last year. And if I'm playing a black-green deck, it's going in there for sure. Tear Asunder. Put this card in your deck. This is one of the best removal spells. If I'm playing a black-green deck, this goes in there now. Black and green have a ton of fantastic removal, and also blue has great removal, right? Again, Curse of the Swine. I would, even in a Sultai deck, I would probably play Curse of the Swine. I love that card. It exiles. You can hit any number of creatures with it, depending on the mana you have. I would put that in here over Go for the Throat, even though it's not instant speed. Rapid hybridization, I would probably play over Go for the Throat. I just don't like non-artifact creature means it's likely not going to be an issue, but sometimes it is, right? Sword of the Animist, again, is a card that you're going to put. It fits in almost every deck, except if you're in green. You don't need it. Goldite Selkie, great fit. By the way, the mutate theme works really well here as well. You know, what you're doing with Cold-Eyed Selkie here, where you're making a big Cold-Eyed Selkie, Cephalid Constable also, those are the two go-tos every time. Cephalid Constable and Cold-Eyed Selkie care about that. It has that many phrase, so I would put Cephalid Constable in here as well. You could win the game with that combo, right? Mutate also works with all of that. So you could do like Brokos or something in here as well, right? Frantic Search, okay. Yeah, that is a great, good way to chuck some stuff in your graveyard. Darksteel Plate, it's okay. I don't think I've ever put Darksteel Plate in a deck. I'm just not the hugest fan of equipment. It's just I find it to be mana intensive. I like Tamiyo Safekeeping. I know it's only a one shot, but Tamiyo Safekeeping just protects any permanent for 1 mana. I don't even know what this does. Funeral Rites, draw 2 cards, you lose 2 life. No. You're putting this in your deck because of the mill part of it, but this is terrible card draw. No, take this out for sure. Stinging Study, draw 5 cards. Put Stinging Study in here. Again, Stinging Study. I should have a list of the cards that I always recommend. Maybe I should write this down. I'm gonna. Stinging Study, Ornithopter of Paradise, Infernal Grasp, Oracle Mage. I could make a video out of this, right? Here's a video idea, guys. Curse of the Swine, sure. Again, I think Curse of the Swine is one of the best board wipes in the format, in my opinion. I mean, even if you're in black. I said it in the last Deck Doctor video. The blue creature removal is almost better than the black stuff. Again, I'm in a deck where I want to be copying my creatures. So Ravenous Chupacabra again. I maybe should add that to the list, right? You want a Ravenous Chupacabra as your removal. So now I have a creature that is removal that when it goes to the graveyard, I can now copy it with my Mimeoplasm. Also, you might want to throw in what your commander's actually doing. Phyrexian Dreadnought, something like that, where it's, I pay 1 mana because you have a lot of creatures that their abilities you want to be copying, but you also need a creature that you want to exile it in its power and toughness, right? +1/+1 counters equal to the power of the other card, right? So just having a Phyrexian Dreadnought, I play it for 1 mana, it immediately dies and goes to the graveyard, and then it's an expensive card, but now this is just an easy way to pile 12 counters on my commander when I cast it, right? Or throwing a few more creatures in here like this as well might be a good idea. I don't love Windfall here. Keep in mind, guys, these effects like Windfall and Wheels, like I say all the time, you could be helping your opponent here big time. You're refilling their hand. If they only have 2 cards in hand, you just let them draw, and someone else has 7, you just let your opponent draw a bunch of cards. That's not great, right? So if I'm not in a wheel theme, I probably don't want to play this. Putrefy's okay. Again, I think there's probably better options in black and green. I like to lean towards the removal that hits anything. You don't have Beast Within. Uh-oh. Yeah, Beast Within is an absolute must if you're, and that's like cardinal rule number 1 on my Deck Doctor is Beast Within. If you're in white, Generous Gift. If you're in green, Beast Within. Those are the 2 best removal spells in the format. You can check out my 5 removal spells video to see the stuff that hits everything. Assassin's Trophy, Beast Within. Those are your 2 best options in a Sultai deck. I also really like, by the way, and I think it's going to fit here maybe. So destroy a monocolored creature. I don't love the limitation there, but it's still pretty good. Destroy an artifact or enchantment. Draw 2 cards, then discard a card. Again, that fits. I would put Sultai Charm in over Windfall because now it's an easy way for me to chuck my Avenger of Zendikar in my graveyard. And it's also pretty good removal. So you might want to throw that in there. I don't think you need Oromokumal. I don't think this is a good fit here. I don't love revealing the top card of my library. Again, there's so much to say with all of this. This video is already going really long, though. I don't like showing everyone what's on top of my library because you're basically revealing every card you draw each turn and showing, hey, here's what I drew, guys. What do you think of that? This is one of these cards that everyone just shoehorned into all their green decks originally because they thought it was a great way to ramp. But it's not a great way to ramp if you don't have lands in your hand or you don't have lands on top of your library. So, I think there are better ways to do it. I would put Skyshroud Claim in my deck over this guy. Again, I don't think you're milling enough to use Splendid Reclamation. I don't think you're milling enough for that. Titan's Nest, I love this card. This card, man, when I first saw this card, I'm like, this is bonkers. And people were, I think I put this on my video of cards that were overhyped, because when people saw this, they're like, you can exile a card from your graveyard to add a colorless? That's bananas. But hardly no one uses this card. If I'm in a Sultai deck that is doing any graveyard strategy at all, it seems like a good fit. Just getting value off of those cards in your graveyard, right? And it also does the at the beginning of your upkeep, look at the top card of your library. You may put. By the way, if you're looking to do that, let's do it this way. Sultai Ascendancy, at the beginning of your upkeep, look at the top 2 cards of your library. Put any number of them into your graveyard and the rest on top of your. So you get to look at the 2 cards. If you want to put one in your hand, you put that back on top of your library. If you want them both, you put them both on top. You put any number into your graveyard. If you want them both in your graveyard, you put them both in your graveyard. We don't need to do this. I don't love this here. We don't need to dredge. Again, I don't love self-mill. I would prefer the draw discard, the frantic search, the looting effects, where I can put exactly what I want into my graveyard rather than milling. Hey, I just put my Buried Alive into my graveyard. Great. I'll never see that again. And that's a fantastic card in your deck, right? I would put a few more good stuff creatures in here that you want to copy yourself. Again, I don't want to rely too heavily on my opponents and what they're doing. All right, I gave you a ton there, man. Again, there's so much to talk about there. I spent enough, like 20 minutes just on your lands. Watch a lot of my other Deck Doctor videos. Again, this is why I'm putting them on my channel now, because there's a lot of really basic stuff here that people need to learn when they're building a commander deck. So
there you go. There you have it. That's me doing my Deck Doctor videos on my Patreon. Again, if you guys are a little confused about what's actually happening, those were actual Deck Doctor videos that I had posted on my Patreon. Some of them are months old now even. And I took them and I sort of chopped out the pieces and I made them more presentable on my channel, I guess you could say. So if you're interested in anything like that, I do have the link for my Patreon in the description below. Feel free to check it out. Even joining on the lowest tier will get you access to the Deck Doctors that I do on a weekly basis on my Patreon. Feel free to join up. That is it for today, though. Thanks for tuning in.